And welcome back to Blow Up the Team. Jeremy here today. We'll be talking about the Detroit Lions and their their 2020 NFL draft picks. Um, if I do speed through this one a little bit, I'm sorry. It is getting late, and this is the second time I've now had to record this video because of a little recording issue that we just had. Which reminds me, let me check and make sure. Yeah, everything seems to be going better this time. But really quickly, any highlights that you see in this video will be the original video will be posted in the description down below. And yes, I know that the clips are from a few years ago. I had to find a Detroit Lions clip that was video that was going to be long enough for me to be able to talk over, and I couldn't find any that were kind of looking like they were going to be long enough. So this is where I ended up. But Matt is very tired. He's already informed me not to expect anything out of him. So let me go ahead and get into it. 2019 Detroit Lions, 3-12-1. This was just not a very good football team, and it'll be very apparent in a few minutes as to why. Um, their offense seemed to be actually pretty, I'm not going to say they were great. They weren't bad. 17th in yards per game, but they were 10th through the air, 21st on the ground, and 18th in points per game. So, that's from a team that was 3-12. You would not necessarily expect, them to be so across the board, kind of middle of the road on offense, which points towards the defense, which we'll talk about in a second. But to kind of help out on offense, they did sign Haloti Vaitai, former Eagle. He was a good rotational piece, and he's flexible and can give a solid time all over the defensive line when you need him to. And they were also able to re-sign Danny Amendola. One very scary thing for the Lions, Chase Daniel is listed as a backup quarterback. So everybody, all the Lions fans out there, you need to pray to everything you know and love that Matt Stafford does not wind up getting injured, because Chase Daniel as your starting quarterback for a week is not something that anybody really wants to see. Um, anyways, let's go over to the defense. They were 31st or second worst in the league in yards allowed per game at just over 400 yards, and they were last in the league in passing yards allowed per game at almost 285 yards through the air. They were 21st in rushing yards allowed per game, which I believe was in a little over 150 yards per game. Um, and they were 26th in points allowed per game at just over 26. So the defense was clearly the issue that this team had. I would even say that it may have slightly inflated, especially their passing numbers, because when you're down so often, you don't have a choice but to throw the football. You got to try to find a way to get back into the football game. So hopefully they're kind of able to reshore up that defense and create a more formidable front, excuse me. But they traded uh, for safety Duron Harmon, which they gave a fifth round pick and got Duron Harmon as well as a seventh round pick. And then they also traded away Darius Slay to the Eagles, where they received a third and fifth round pick. So, as an Eagles fan, very happy about that trade. We were finally able to get a very very solid cornerback to play outside for us. And unfortunately for the Lions, that is a hit for you guys. That was one of the in a very bad passing defense. That was the one guy that you weren't necessarily worried about. But let's talk about guys that they brought in. They did sign defensive tackle Danny Shelton. He's shown as a solid run defender, as well as they signed defensive tackle Nick Williams. Both of these guys are the two guys that you'll expect to be your starting defensive tackles going into next season, and so hopefully they'll be able to shore up the inside of that defensive line. Next up, they did sign cornerback Desmond Trufant. I believe that's probably their attempt to replace Darius Slay. He's a veteran guy. He's been able to be productive in Atlanta, I believe, for the past few years. So I don't think he's necessarily on Darius Slay's level, but that is you should be able to get solid play out of him, and he'll be able to kind of fill in that veteran role nicely. They also signed linebacker Jamie Collins, he's just been very flexible and able to play all over the defense. Um, and then that makes sense because they're going to be looking for just guys that'll be able to give them solid playing time and kind of fill in for that defense. The defense kind of is in a position where it's going to need all the help that it can get. Um, they also signed safety Javon Curse. He's listed as a backup right now, but he's developed a great mind for the game, so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some playing time. And they also signed linebacker Reggie Ragland. So, as you would expect from a defense that had that bad of a season last year, they were very active in the offseason, looking to bring in as many defensive guys as they could to try and shore up that defense in any way that they could think of, because that defense just plainly just looked like it needed help last year. Um, but anyway, getting into the draft, um, the third overall pick of the draft, their first pick of the draft, they went with Jeff Okuda out of Ohio State, cornerback. Um, he's got solid size, quick feet, and he's got a good playing speed. He was a wide receiver in high school, and he still shows those hands from time to time. But he does have the ability, because of that, to be able to go up and come down with the football, create some interceptions and takeaways. So that's a good guy to be able to add to your secondary on that defense. He is an average tackler, and he does sometimes struggle to get off blocks, but he does come down to make plays and run support often. And he is currently listed as a starting cornerback alongside Desmond Trufant. So you're getting immediate playing time out of him, and immediate potential. Um, and again, him being active in run support is a good sign for that. Is a good sign for that defense, because you're going to need guys that'll be able to make plays all over the field. You kind of need those jack of all trades type guys, because the defense, again, I'm going to keep saying it, they just look like they needed help last year, especially in guarding against the pass. So having a flexible guy like that you can kind of put back there and you're going to get production out of is a great way to look for the first pick for the Lions. Next up, I'm going to talk about DeAndre Swift. Um, I really like this kid. The few games that I did watch of him, he just looked like he just was an explosive back, and he's got great burst and top end speed. He just seemed like he was always a threat every time he got the ball in his hands. Um, he's got good vision with the ball, so he's going to be able to find those holes and get upfield. And he's got good hands out of the backfield. So as a solid route runner coming out of college is not something that you can always expect. And as soon as the ball is in his hands, he is a threat. So him being a solid route runner and having those good hands will be an asset to that offense for sure. He does help out in pass protection as well. Um, and as of right now, he is listed as your lead running back, even ahead of Kerryon Johnson, who has shown some promise in the past few years. So I really like this kid, and I really think he's going to be productive at an NFL level, especially if the offensive line play can improve for the Lions. So um, hopefully I'm right, and this kid is able to be productive for the Lions. But um, yeah, it just seemed like this kid was always productive. It always seemed like when he had the ball in his hands, even if he didn't necessarily go for huge gain or any breakaway plays, it just seemed like a big tough back that was just going to be able to just be effective at an NFL level, which is something that you were looking for. Next up, they went with Julian Akwara out of Notre Dame. He is an athletic prospect, but he's specifically limited to playing on the edge. He has closing bursts with speed off the edge, but he can cover a lot of ground as a run defender. But he does give some ground against stronger tacklers, and he also needs to develop better secondary moves other than just relying on his speed to be able to get around the outside, to be able to continue to be productive. He did have I did read that um, there was kind of an outside in move that he kind of toyed with a little bit, but nothing really solid. And you're going to need that solid kind of secondary move if you want to continue to be effective at the NFL level. Um, and just a quick thing that I found was pretty interesting. He is, as of right now, listed as a backup to his brother, Romeo Aquara, at the outside linebacker spot. So he's definitely got potential, but he's going to need to continue to develop at an NFL level, to be able to play at an NFL level, excuse me. So, I mean, I don't dislike the pick. I think that he could give them some solid playing time this year, and hopefully he'll be able to continue to develop. Um, Next up, they went with Jonah Jackson, offensive guard out of Ohio State. Um, he's got good size and strength, and he looks to be a solid run blocker who anchors well. But he does get caught lunging at sometimes, which is something that I've noticed a kind of a lot of offensive linemen coming out of college struggle with. Um, he also needs to improve his hand fighting a little bit in order to be able to continue to be effective in pass protection. But as of right now, he is listed as your starting right guard. So um, immediate value out of a mid-third round pick here as we're looking to start and kind of help out that offensive line and block for the guy that we were just talking about, and DeAndre Swift. So, um, I like the pick here. The offensive line needed some help, and it looks like they were able to get it. It's just gonna all be about how his game is able to translate against coming up to the NFL speed. So, you know, we'll be interested. We'll have to follow that and be interested to see how that all turns out. Um, Next up, I believe, is Logan Stenberg out of Kentucky, another offensive guard. Again, he's got good size and strength, and he takes good angles and seems to be strong enough to be able to create a push in the run game, as well as anchoring well in pass protection. However, he does seem to be limited athletically, and he does struggle against quick interior defenders. So anybody that's quick off the line could potentially show him some struggle and get past him and create some disruption in the backfield. Um, and as a mid fourth round, I think he was a fourth round pick if I'm correct. Yeah, mid fourth round pick. He is listed as your fourth string left guard right now, so that's a little bit troublesome. That your mid fourth round pick is listed as a fourth string right now. Um, Hopefully I'm wrong and he's able to develop quickly and he can become an impactful player on that line. I mean, hopefully immediately, but it does look like that's going to be a little bit of a project piece, and that's a little bit earlier than I would have liked to have seen them pick a project piece like that. Um, but moving on here to the fifth round, Quintez Cephas. Um, he's average height, but he seems to be well built. I do believe I saw the word chiseled listed in his description somewhere. He runs hard after the catch, and he's not afraid of contact, which is something that you love to see. And he's got good body control, and he fights hard in traffic. Um, he does tend to occasionally drop passes. They do believe that could be partly due to him having some smaller hands, and he does seem to have what they call the quote marginal initial burst and top end speed. So it'll be interesting to see how that's all able to translate to an NFL level. Um, he is officially listed at the second wide receiver as part of the second wide receiver unit. So it does look like he could get some playing time this season, especially kind of as the season goes on and inevitably injuries kind of become a factor, and some of the older guys like Danny Amendola, who I brought up earlier, kind of gonna need a rest. So it'll be interesting to see how if he's able to kind of play um, at an NFL level. I did see that it mentioned that he is competitive when trying to catch in traffic. So, um, that's also a good sign. Hopefully he'll be able to kind of make an impact for this team. But moving on here um, to Jason Huntley, running back out of New Mexico State, excuse me. Um, he is a bit undersized, but he's got great top end speed, and he shows promise as a pass catcher. And with that speed, he's got the ability to be a threat anytime the ball is in his hands. So even though he's currently listed as a fourth string running back, especially at such an injury-prone position, I would expect that he could see some playing time, especially in something like where they might throw him a quick screen or something like that, just to get the ball in his hands and kind of allow him to get outside the tackles and see what he can do kind of in open field. So. Not a horrible pick, even though he is kind of listed late, like lower in the depth charts. You could see him kind of find a place in the offense. Running back is one of those positions that a lot of those guys there in the depth chart will eventually find playing time, anyways. Um, Next up, Josh Pennicini, defensive tackle out of Utah. He's got some decent size and strength, and he shows flashes of the ability to get off of blocks. But he does seem to be much better defending the rush than the pass. Although he does occasionally show the ability to push the pocket in and cause some disruption in that way. Um, I wasn't able to find a whole lot on this kid, but he is listed as a fourth-string defensive tackle, and we're kind of seeing a trend here that I don't think that fans are necessarily going to like. As a team that was looking for a lot of help going into this offseason, and a team that was going to be needing to try to find a way to turn it all around. Having guys that are listed so low in the depth chart and that are clearly going to be project pieces for the team just points towards another few struggling years for the team. So hopefully um, they all pan out and they're able to to kind of turn those into productive players for years going forward. And we're never going to root against, or very rarely, if ever, going to root against players on this channel. So hopefully it all works itself out. But it does seem a little bit worrisome for me as a team that's struggling is going to need immediate help. How are they going to be able to kind of wait for these guys to develop? And finally, they went with another guy, the same thing as I was just talking about, Jason Cornell, out of Ohio State, defensive end. He did play both tackle and end at Ohio State, and he's big enough to be both effective against the run and show some upside as an interior pass rusher. But, quote, he projects as a rotational defensive lineman, not a starter. So this is something that for the last quite a few of the kind of back end of the draft, the back half of the draft, they seem to be project pieces of guys that they're kind of hoping will be able to turn into players for them down the field. And I'm not gonna, he was a seventh round pick. There's hardly, if ever, any guaranteed talent that will translate. There's always talent everywhere in the draft, but in terms of NFL translating talent, you never quite know what you're gonna get in the seventh round. Um, so I'm not going to come at them too hard for this pick, but again, it just seems like even starting all the way back up with Logan Stenberg out of Kentucky, fourth round pick listed as a fourth string left guard on an offensive line that wasn't necessarily the most solid of lines in the past couple of years. So hopefully, I'm wrong and these players will turn into impactful players for them, but it just feels like they could have maybe gotten more immediate value out of their picks than they were able to fetch, according to where they're listed on the depth charts coming out of the draft and kind of where they're projected to be as they continue to develop. So getting into the draft grade here, I think I am going to go ahead and give them a B minus. Um, Again, they had quite a few picks that it felt like they did a great job. In terms, especially, I really like those first two picks that they had with the corner out of Ohio State as well as the running back out of Georgia. Um, they both seem like solid picks that they'll be great players for them for the next few years, especially coming into the season. You're going to be looking for all hope that you can as a Lions fan after as a kind of a tragic season that you had last year. But I do worry that kind of in the middle of I was to be honest with you, I was between C plus and B minus. I do like DeAndre Swift enough and Jeff Okuda enough where I'm gonna kind of push them over to that B minus line, but kind of getting into the middle of that draft there, I was mildly concerned because it just felt like they've drafted quite a few project pieces, and as a team that was kind of struggling as hard as much as they were struggling the past couple of years, you wouldn't want to necessarily be drafting all these project pieces. You would want to kind of get as many impactful players immediately as you can. And obviously, you never know for sure as you kind of get into the back half of the draft what will translate and what won't. But it just felt like as I'm kind of going through the draft and I'm looking at kind of other teams' picks, it just seems like other teams were able to get guys that will be kind of more immediate fill-ins and more immediate impact players later in the draft. So. Um, I think a B minus is solid for them. I think they made a couple of smart moves. Again, this grade also only for the draft. It does not rate anything else to do with their offseason. And I think with a couple of picks that they did make in the draft, the big names towards the beginning of the draft, they made sense and they fit in the team well. So I think a B minus is where they're going to end up. I know Matt is tired and probably not listening, but do you have anything else to add before I wrap this up?
No, I am listening. I mean, it's going to be a tough couple of years. I mean, they didn't entirely blow up, but they didn't entirely go crazy on this draft. So it's going to be a rough couple of years being a Lions fan. But I feel like Lions fans are kind of used to it at this point. But have to wait and see what happens with them. There's a lot of question marks in this, and so yeah, I don't have anything too unique to add.
All right. So with that being said, again, you can go ahead and check out those highlights down in the description down below. I'll have the link there. Um, Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you think I missed something, if you think I was right about something, you agree, disagree, make sure you go ahead and leave that comment down below. We do read all of your comments, considering we don't get that many of them. So we do our best to respond as well. So go ahead and leave those down below. Other than that, check out our Discord, check out our social media. Those are also linked in the description down below. And we'll be back tomorrow with a Detroit Tigers video, right? You wanna...
Yes. The really awesome Detroit Tigers who are going to really tear up the league next year.
I
Or
can
this year.
feel the sarcasm dripping from here.
Oh,
So,
really? Can you?
so with that being said, we will see you tomorrow, and peace.